So in today's session, as I say, we're going to be discussing automation, specifically for accounting and finance. And a paper I always refer back to is the World Economic Forum with Future of Jobs report. The most recent one is 2023. And in that report, it did, sort of shows lots of interesting things, including like the top fastest declining jobs. And in the top fastest declining jobs, at number 7 is accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll clerks. So I think the whole automation piece has been with us for some time, but I think that statistic very much shows that at least certain tasks are very much in decline. And so you might think, well, manual data entry and manual processes are dead, aren't they? However, in the same report, that 2023 Future of Jobs report, we can learn that 34% of tasks were automated back in 2022. And their prediction was that this would rise to 43% of tasks being automated by 2027. So that leaves 57% of tasks for us still to do. And certainly from my own experience and speaking to clients and software vendors, there's always more we can automate. It's an ongoing process. And I know that every firm and organization has a huge number of processes. And it's that $1 million question, how we can automate, make it more manageable. Can we get apps to communicate? All these kind of challenges we have. Well, luckily here today, I am joined by two fantastic guests who can share their experiences firsthand of automation. Mark who's our Excel and Power Guru, BI Guru, who's got the coveted MVP status, and he's going to be talking about some Microsoft tools, and we're going to deep dive into automation. And we've got Tracey, our FD here at First Intuition. And she's been on a journey, as I was just saying, using Microsoft products to very much help us with the reporting process and gathering data from lots of different sources and making our reports more user-friendly through things like dashboards. So let's make a start, and apologies for the mute issue there. So I would love to have a chat with Mark first of all. Perhaps we could just set the scene, Mark, and you can kind of talk about the opportunities we've got with automation, both at a strategic level and then also at the end user level as well.
So I've actually got some slides, Louisa. If are you happy for me to share some slides?
That would be fantastic. Yeah, go for it.
We all love a few slides, don't we? Well, I say that. Maybe you don't. Anyway,
thank you.
we all love some slides. So hopefully you can all see my screen. So just in terms of like the kind of the landscape, as it were, as Louise said. So this kind of, we need to think, in my opinion, we need to think in two ways. We've got kind of the organizational tools. These are the ones that are introduced by companies to meet specific purposes. And if you think about Sage, Xero, Power BI, Tableau, SAP, Data Rails, Anaplan, any of those kind of larger tools that have specific software licenses, they are kind of, those automation tools exist at an organizational level. Now, you might not think of all of these as automation tools, but Xero has lots of features that helps you to automate your invoicing and send reminders and all of those things. So that sits at that kind of organizational level. But and often as end users, we can't necessarily control what tools our company has or doesn't have, but we have those tools that exist for a specific purpose, and we should try and master as many of those tools as we can. But also we end up with what we can think of as kind of personal automation tools. And these are the ones that companies, we have these tools, they're kind of general use. We don't have any centralized governance over them, but we can use those tools when they're at our disposal. So we've got kind of Power Automate, Power Query, we've got VBA and macros, we've got Office scripts. We might even think about Python in that same category. These are general use tools that we as individuals can make use of. So for the organizational ones, we can't decide we're suddenly going to implement Xero unless we're a one-person organization. But that needs to be an organizational decision. Lots of people involved in that, a project team that works through that. But these personal automation tools, we can make use of these, and they're generally available inside the tools that we have. So with a lot of these kind of personal use tools, they're available inside our existing subscriptions. They're available right now for us to use today. So I think that's kind of, in terms of the two aspects of organizational personal, they're the two ways to think about it, or how I think about it anyway.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think it's really fascinating how Microsoft has developed, isn't it? I mean, particularly in recent time with the huge array of opportunities we've got and the different tools. So yeah, I think that's definitely something to be great to dive into in a bit more detail as we go through the this lunch and learn right now. Fantastic. But I happen to know that up your sleeve, you might have something called a reporting and analysis blueprint, and it'd be great to hear more about that.
So let's let me share my screen again. So if we put this into hopefully you can see I haven't clicked share. There we go. So if we put it into context, a lot of our accounting processes, so we've got our organizational tools, but we've got all the other tools that we have to use. So often our accounting processes involve us kind of downloading something from our accounting system, some actuals data, whatever it happens to be. We copy and paste that into a workbook. And that's when we have to carry out a lot of manual actions, such as deleting rows and filling blanks and creating pivot tables and copying and pasting that to other workbooks. And then we have to do something similar with our budget data. We might have some other data, and we're carrying out lots and lots of these manual actions because we're suddenly outside of those core systems. And that's because those core systems are designed to do a specific thing, which isn't always flexible enough for what our end users actually need. So therefore, we need to take that data out and do something with it. And we normally end up copying and pasting that into Excel and doing a lot of manual work. Eventually, after we've done all these manual steps, we get to the finish and we celebrate, we're happy, everything's done, until, of course, we have to post a journal, the numbers change, someone discovers an error, and then we have to go all the way back to the start again and go through these processes over and over again. So we end up with this kind of piece where even in Excel, we have a formula, and the formula, you type into a cell and numbers update. So that would be like an automated process at that point. You change a cell, numbers update, but then we might copy and paste that to somewhere else. Then we've got some other level of automation. We've got all these steps that we end up stepping into, and we end up with a lot of copy and paste phases. So our goal is ultimately to try and remove all copy and paste or remove any manual actions that we can. So ultimately our goal is to try and replace hundreds of clicks or hundreds of manual actions with just 1 or 2 clicks. And imagine if your procedure notes just said, open up file, change date, click refresh. Wouldn't that be awesome? I work for a company where just to reconcile stock was over 20 pages of notes. When actually it wasn't actually that complex, but it was a lot of copy this here, add this here, change this number there. There was a lot of individual steps that we need to take. It could have been reduced down literally to open file, change date, click refresh. So this reporting analysis blueprint that Louisa mentioned is a way that we can think about the tools that we have and the tools we have available without actually having to, well, we can think about it and then try and eradicate copy and paste from our processes. So effectively, it's a 7-step process. We're going to look at the first 5 now. Later on, hopefully, I'll get time to mention the last 2. So the first 5 steps are input. No matter what we do, we're always starting with input of some kind, whether it's a file or a folder, whether we're connecting to a database. We've got some input of some kind. We then, rather than taking that input and then copying and pasting it to an Excel workbook and carrying out manual actions, what we want to do is to reshape that input before we even get it into Excel. So we want to reshape it into a data layout and then land that perfect format inside Excel. Then we can use our formulas to calculate, and then we can turn that into some form of visualization or something similar. And a lot of this we do inside Excel, but often our inputs come from kind of files and folders and databases. And in each of these phases, these are the kind of words that we tend to use. So files and folders, databases, that's in the input phase. In our reshape phase, we've got Power Query. In terms of data, we might talk about tables or a pivot cache or a data model. When we're in the calculate phase, we might talk about formulas and pivot tables, or even the DAX calculation language. And when we're in the visualize phase, we talk about tabular layouts and charts and other things. So the key point here is around the piece around data and how we get from our input to data and how we reshape that with Power Query. So once we've controlled our inputs, and we might use some VBA, we might use some Power Automate on that. We might see some of that a bit later. The key thing is we can, using a tool called Power Query, and we're going to see that in a few moments, we can refresh Power Query, and that will then cause our calculations to update, which will then cause, we can then get to this kind of visualize phase. So just by clicking refresh in Excel, we can cause all of our reports to update. And that then brings us to the point where we visualize, which we might have created a journal, we might have created a reconciliation, we might have created a list of variances. So we don't have to think about visualizations always in terms of charts. It literally could be, I need to create my month-end stock journal. How can I do that? I can go into Excel, I can change whatever month-end date I want, I can click refresh, and then everything flows through and then tells me what my month-end stock journal might have to be. But once we get to this point 5, we then reconcile and analyze. This is where we add benefit. Point 5, we can investigate, we can gain insight, we can adjust, we can find out what's actually going on in our numbers. but we go through this kind of this loop of 1 to 5 over and over again. And we call this the refresh, resize, and recalc cycle, because that's what's happening. Each time we change our inputs, we refresh, Excel puts it into a table, which then resizes all of our data, and then can then recalculate automatically. So that's kind of the blueprint, or the first 5 stages of the blueprint that we like to think about in terms of how we can use the tools we have available inside Excel as part of that personal automation piece. And the key thing there is Power Query. That's the bit that kicks everything off.
Oh, many thanks indeed for that, Mark. Yeah, and I was just reflecting on that sort of reshape piece and Power Query, because that's often the hang up with data analysis, isn't it? That so much time gets spent just tidying up the data, isn't it? The statistic, like 80% of the time is spent on that tidy up phase. So I think that's where Power Query can really come into its own to really help us at that stage, couldn't it? Well, what do you reckon, Mark? Do you think it might be time to give it a little demo of what we can do with Power Query?
So let's have a look. Let's have a quick demo. Hopefully you can still see my screen.
We can indeed, yes.
Good. So I've got an example here. It's partially built already, which is always a good start. But what I've got is I've got some data in this payroll file, and our goal here, so we're going to go from start to finish reasonably quickly, is that our goal in this example is all we want to do is to find out what the variances are between last month's payroll file and this month's payroll file. So if I open up one of these files as an example, we might have a third-party provider who gives us information about our payroll. So this is just a simplified view. We've got the employee number, their name, what their gross pay is, the PAYE, NIC, and what the net is. Just as a simple example, you might get data in this kind of format, but we've got multiple versions of this file. So we've got kind of got November's file saved in December, and we've got a few more months as well. So what we want to do is to create a process that means that all we have to do is change a date and click refresh, and it's automatically going to show us all of our variances from these files. We're not going to open these files. We're not going to copy and paste from these files. It's going to give it all for us automatically. And for this, we use a tool called Power Query. So in the Data tab in Excel, Power Query exists in this Get and Transform data section. You can't really see it's called Power Query at this point, but it is. We'll see it's called Power Query in a few moments' time. So I'm going to connect to one of those Excel workbooks. So let me just find my source files. Here we go. So I've got my data. I'm going to connect to this payroll file, and I'm going to connect to the date from the. Oh, actually, before we get there, let me just talk about this file in a bit more detail. So I've got my date here. This is the date that we want to reconcile at. We've then got the file path of where these files are saved, and then we've just got a formula that says, well, based on the date, I know that my source file should be, and hopefully you can see at the end there. Let me zoom in on that. My source file is called payroll, so 2023, that's the year, period 12, and then the 31st. So that'd be my current month file. I've got my prior month file, and you can see that that's there being the 2023 11/30. So they're the dates at which our payroll or the monthly payrolls were paid. And also for these, we've got these named ranges. So this one's called current month, and this one is called prior month. So these file paths, we have a kind of way of referencing these file paths. Now let me go into Excel, and we're now going to connect to one of these files. So let me grab the first December file. So this is now when Power Query opens up. So we haven't opened our payroll file at the moment. We're not going to copy and paste it into Excel. We're going to use this tool called Power Query. We're going to connect to that worksheet. So this is now going to give me the data from that worksheet that's connected straight to that worksheet as a data source. Now, if we look at this, this is what's in that worksheet. It's not in a particularly usable format because we've got these header rows and other things. So Power Query enables us to make transformations. So I'm going to remove, say, my top. I'm going to remove the top 4 rows. I'm going to use my first row as headers. And just by doing that, I've now got a really tidy data set that I can use. Let me call this current month. So I've got a really tidy data set. This is connected to that original source file. Any changes I'm making here are not changed in that original file. Now I'm going to do something a little bit advanced here. As you saw earlier, we had these kind of file paths and they were connected to a named range. So I can make sure that whatever is in that file path, this is what pulls into our Power Query here. So let me just make a change. I'm just going to add this in. I said this is a little bit of an advanced technique just that we can connect to a file using a cell reference. There you go. So I'm still connected to that file. Let me duplicate this query and we'll create one for the prior month as well. Then we'll change our file path to reference our prior month named range. So we've now got two queries. One's referencing our current month and one's referencing the prior month. Let me load these both back into Excel. So now Excel is going to create some worksheets, one for the current month and one for the prior month. There you go. So that's the data for the current month and the prior month based on the cell references. So if I change this cell reference to the 31st of January 2024, now you might not see any changes, but there are changes. If I click data and refresh all, it's now going to reload that data and bring that data in. So you can see the current month is currently churning away. And that's now brought in that new data. So we've brought the data in, but we then want to kind of calculate on that data. And Excel has got some fabulous new formulas that we can use. So let's work out what variances we've got. So one of the first functions I'm going to use is VStack. This helps us to combine ranges together. Don't worry if you've not seen these formulas before. This is just to illustrate what we can now achieve with Excel. So I'm going to stack my reference numbers together and then create a unique list. So the unique function gives us a unique list of the items from those columns. And let's put these in a sorted order. So now I've got a list from both of those columns, from both of my prior month and the current month, all of my employee reference numbers. And now I can use a sum ifs, which you might be more comfortable with. And I want to sum from my current month. Let's look at the gross pay. I want to sum that where my employee number is equal to my list of employee numbers. So now I've got my list of all of those, of how much my current in the current month were paid. We've got the previous month as well. So let's use a sum ifs on this. So again, we're going to sum from the prior month gross column where the number, the employee number is equal to our reference number. So I've now got my current month and my prior month. I get my variance. So I'll do my current month minus my previous month. Now, we can see this 3,308 difference, but we've got all of our employees here. So why don't we instead, see how this is up. So we can use equals filter, and we want to filter this list where our variance does not equal 0. So we now know that it's these employees, they're the ones that have the differences. We can drag this across. What have I done wrong? I've followed the wrong one. There we go. So we get the right formulas. So we can now see exactly which employees we've got our variance on. I'm just going to change my formatting back over here. So we can now see exactly which employees we've got our variance on. Now, we don't have to build this every time. We can save this. And then next month, when we open up this workbook, it comes to the 29th of February, 2024. So we've opened the file, we enter the date, click data, refresh all. That's now going to calculate through, get all of that information, and tell us that between our February and January file, we had 7,741 difference, and they are our list of variances and the employee reference numbers that they relate to. So it looks like we've got some joiners and leavers, and it looks like someone might have had a pay increase, but we can then follow up and investigate those and add our benefit. We save this, we close it. Next month we come along, we open up this file, 31st of March, 2024. We click refresh all. That's now going to go and get all of our data. And it should, the current month is just loading. There we go, we've got a variance of 8,841. We can see exactly what that variance is and exactly which employees that relates to. So that's what Power Query can do for us. Without copying and pasting, all we need to do is get that file, save it in the right location with the right file name, and then we can come into Excel, refresh all, and everything updates automatically. And that's because we have this kind of framework that we work through about thinking about how we take our inputs. We reshape them with Power Query into data, and then we can calculate and visualize. And that means we can go through this cycle exceptionally quickly. So we don't copy and paste, we don't have to move anything else. So that kills a lot of the manual actions that we might have to perform.
And that was fantastic. Many thanks indeed for showing us, Mark. I really enjoyed watching that, and yeah, really just seeing how you built it and built it very quickly. And then bingo, you can just pop in the next month, can't you? And bingo, it refreshes.
I mean, to be clear, not every scenario is going to be as easy as that.
No, that is a fair point, isn't it? I appreciate you've got the data nicely set up to make it nice and easy.
Yes.
Yeah, in reality, there are challenges, and actually, that really nicely segues into bringing in Tracey into our chat as well about the reality. Because Tracey, it'd be great to chat about some of your experiences that you know, some of the journey you've been on with your team, in terms of, maybe first of all you could kind of just talk about some of the processes that you have automated, and yeah, give us some examples and we can go from there.
Yeah, so I say the example that Mark just went through is really great to show you exactly how quickly you can transform your data. And I would also just say not to worry if you didn't understand all those formulas or how you would link all those files together, because I use Power Query in a much more basic way than Mark was potentially showing, although I'm really fabulously interested in those file links, which looked really great. So in terms of using it in the business, it's Power Query is one of the most brilliant tools I've ever learned to use, I have to say, because it does save so much time. So what I tend to use it for is anywhere where we have a lot of data that we do need to do the same type of repetitive actions to all the time. So one of the key things I use it with is our sales dashboard reporting. So because obviously sales are changing all the time, and we use Xero as a financial reporting system, it's a brilliant system, but some of the functionality of getting reports from it are slightly more basic and doesn't provide nice dashboards that other people can easily look at and understand with pie charts and graphs and things like that. So we can take the download that comes from Xero in terms of our baseline data for our sales, and you can update it as many times as you like. So if you want to do it daily, weekly, monthly, however often you want to do it, hourly if you wanted to, you can take a download. I would then take that download and save it in an Excel file, which is already linked into my dashboard that I've created. And what it's going to do is exactly what Mark showed you there, is it's transforming the data into data tables. So the bit he was showing you where you can kind of remove some rows, put headers in, there are a lot of things you can do in that stage to transform your data. So one of the things that I would use it for is just to make sure that we have got it into the correct format, and it's showing perhaps the date might come out as a day, a month and a year. Now I might want to split that into day, month, year, but I don't want to have to do that manually every time and use a formula every time. So the Power Query function can do that really easily for you. So you just literally hit refresh query and it will separate that column out into day, month, year. And that enables me to be able to put splitters into my dashboard reporting so that I can focus down on each day, or I can focus on a month, or I can focus on a year. So it would depend on how you would want to filter your data. But that is a really, really useful function in Power Query. From obviously that's the Power Query part, which is reshaping your data, as Mark talked about. Once it's into those data tables, I'm then transforming it again using calculations, and then using Power Query, Power Pivot tables to create my dashboard reporting. Now, again, once you've created those Power Pivot tables, which then create your Power Pivot charts, so it could be a pie chart, it could be just a normal bar chart, whatever it happens to be, you've already set those up. So as soon as you've refreshed your Power Query, you can refresh your Power Pivot, and it will just automatically update all of your dashboards. And it is literally as quick as download, save data, press refresh, and that is it. Everything is updated. So rather than a process that could take you a long while to manually do each time, it is time saving, immensely time saving. I can't really express how much time it does save. So that's one of the functions that we use it for in the business. Another function that we use it for is we get a lot of apprenticeship data. So that comes in really big spreadsheets. And as you can imagine, we're training many apprentices, and we have many apprentices on program, ones that have left, ones that have completed. And we need to be able to report on that data. So again, that data is coming in a specific format to us. It's not very useful, and to look at it in the format it's in is not very helpful. So again, being able to use Power Query to transform that data into data that's more useful for us to use, that reshaping process that Mark talked about, is great, because each month we can then use that process and we can click the button, the refresh button, and it enables us to be able to utilize the tools that are there to do things in a much quicker manner. I did a course maybe like 18 months ago with Mark, and he taught me the basics of being able to do this. However, I would say you do need to put a fair amount of time aside yourself to sit and look at how you're going to do things. So I think the first step is you have to sit back and think, how could you use that Power Query tool? So some of the examples that Mark went through on the course I did were really useful to start my mind going, to think about, oh, actually, these are areas where we have data that we could transform and reshape into a different way and do it quickly. So yes, that was really, really useful to be able to go on that course, but I did then need to spend time thinking about how I was going to use it, and then obviously creating the Power Query tool. So Mark did something fabulously quickly there. I would say the first time I set something up, it took me significantly longer than it took Mark then just to quickly set that up. But having said that, the benefits are there in the long term. So taking the time to set something up initially does give you that long-term benefit. So it really is worth spending that time.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for talking that through, Tracey. It's really interesting to hear about. And as you say, it's that time saving, isn't it? And that's so cumulative, isn't it? If you think of it's a process that's, as you said, daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, whatever it is, every single time, that's a huge amount of time being saved that just adds up to, you know, hours, days, months, even over time, doesn't it? So it really makes a big difference. That's brilliant. So in terms of things that you needed to get going, you did say about, you know, there is that time initially, you have to make that sort of short-term get pain for that long-term gain, don't you? And some training as well. What other things do you think were sort of helpful in terms of getting going at that stage?
I think it's part of it's just being brave, getting out of your, you know, it wasn't in my comfort zone. So I went on the course, and, you know, going on a course is kind of the easy bit, really, because you've then got to do the hard bit, which is actually use your own brain and use those skills to apply it to your business. So I think be prepared to be out of your comfort zone a bit, and to just play with it and experiment a bit with it. So because it's not something that's perhaps intuitive to me, but it is definitely something that everybody can learn. So I would say that's something to bear in mind. Mark made it look really easy then, and it does really pay dividends. But I think it did take me a little while to sit down and think hard about things. I think the other thing to bear in mind is, if you're the only person that can do it in your team, that's probably going to be a problem, because at some point your Power Query will probably go wrong, or for example, if your baseline data changes in its format. So for example, if our apprenticeship reports have an extra column that come in them for whatever reason, they've changed them, then the whole thing can fall over quite quickly. But you just need to be able to adapt and rewrite your Power Query at that point. If you happen to be away on holiday and nobody else in your team knows how to do that, then that's a problem. So you are going to have to make an investment in time, not only yourself, but you probably need to upskill other members of your team as well, just to make sure that they are aware of how to use Power Query. And that's a good thing, right? Because, you know, everyone could do with a bit of extra training. And, you know, it's helpful to have other skilled members in your team. And I think it is time saving, and it starts to get them thinking about the processes that they do, and being able to utilise Power Query for those processes as well. So all round, it's a winner. it's just the time element initially to set it all up, I think.
Yeah, well, many thanks indeed for sharing that. It's really really great to hear those reflections and those thoughts. As you say, we have to make that sort of time input at the start, don't we? But yeah, definitely the short-term pain to get that long-term benefit. We have to remember that goal, don't we? We're working towards. That's really helpful. Well, thank you. And perhaps probably could pop back over to you, Mark. Perhaps you could just add any comments you've thought from what we've just been discussing with Tracey.
Yeah, I mean, it is a different way of thinking about how you approach problems, because we're normally used to copy and pasting using formulas and actually using the mouse and going through these steps. It is a completely different approach, and even everyone who has whatever baseline Excel skills, normally that was learned over time, wasn't it? You start your first job, maybe you've never used Excel. Oh, how do I even insert a row? Someone tells you. How do you do this VLOOKUP thing? Someone tells you, oh, how do I do this? Someone comes across your desk and they show you how to, oh, that's neat, I'll use that. And you pick up bits piece by piece. With a lot of these newer tools, your chances of finding somebody in your business who already knows this is probably lower. So therefore it's kind of, you're not going to be able to learn on picking up small bits here and there. It will take some actual investment in terms of time. And hopefully, as Tracey said, once you've picked it up, hopefully in your business, you'll then start to show others. They'll be like, wow, I didn't know it could do this. And then they'll see the benefits, and hopefully everyone in your team will want to use Power Query and should be using it in this way, because it cuts out such a huge amount of time. But there is a learning curve. Even at the start, you go, oh, this is so easy. And then suddenly there's a learning curve that you have to go up, and that is there. And it's just the way that we learn anything. But it's the case that once you built your process once, which might, let's face it, if you start small, start with the smallest task you can. It might take you a while, but the next time you just refresh and it goes through and you refresh. And then once you build those skills, you then build up onto the next task and the next task and the next task. So hopefully you start to build up your skill over time. If you start with your most complex task, you'll give up before you even get going, because you haven't built up those small skills and then building up to bigger items.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that start small, pick the low-hanging fruit is really useful.
Yep.
Sort of reflection point, isn't it? Thank you very much. Yeah, well, if anyone's got any questions or thoughts, please do pop them in the chat box, and we'll respond to those. But also, Mark, I think you might have another demo up your sleeve, haven't you?
We've looked at the first kind of 5 steps of this blueprint. Let's go and have a look at the remaining 2. Let me share my screen. So we saw the first 5 steps. The last 2 steps are almost, it might be a bit, well, that's obvious. So the last 2 steps are present and then distribute. So once we've got all of our individual things together, we then need to present them. So we package them up in some way, and then we distribute them. And this is when we start to have to use other applications such as PowerPoint, if it's a board deck, or Word, or we might email things out using Outlook. We might even work with SharePoint and various other things. So these are the terms that we tend to use in the present stage, which is dashboards and presentations and documents, and email and share location printing. But we then have to start using other technologies, because so far we've used everything that's in Excel. Suddenly we have to go outside of Excel. So when we think about the tools that we have outside of Excel, we've got the tools that we might think of. We've got VBA macros. So that's how we write code and control Excel. But macros can control Outlook. We can control PowerPoint. From Excel, we can control almost any other Windows application using macros. We've got a new tool that's called Power Automate Desktop. This is available natively inside Windows 11. It's a free download for Windows 10. And we can use this for building up automation processes on our desktop. We might also get Python. Python's open source, it's free, but it does require an additional installation, and that's more of a coding option. Now, the problem with Python and VBA macros is that companies are getting more concerned about security issues, and because once you've got access to an entire PC, you've got access to someone's entire network. So suddenly VBA, so macros and Python add an additional level of risk in terms of what they can do, because they can do almost anything. On the OneDrive and SharePoint side, because a lot of people will be using OneDrive and SharePoint, the equivalent technologies that we have are Office scripts and then Power Automate Online. So they're kind of the equivalent technologies that we could use. So what I'm going to do now is just show a demo or a quick look at what Power Automate Online is and how we might use that. So in this example, we've got this report. It's a reasonably meaningless report, but we've got different regions in here. So if I change this to north, it will then update, or south, it'll update. So we've got various information here that we've got with these reports. And what we want to do is to send a PDF version of this report to specific people. So in this here, we've got a list that says, right, so Dave, Sally, Winston, Mandy, Jack and Helen, these are the email addresses that they'll be sent to. We want to send a PDF version of these reports to these people. So this is the case that we've got our report, we've created it, it might be Power Query, we now just need to send each of these out to lots of different people. So this is currently saved on OneDrive. It would equally work if it was saved on SharePoint. We can come to this tool that's called Power Automate. So this is what Power Automate might look like, what a flow looks like. And it's basically just a list of instructions. So if we want to add an instruction here, I can add an action. So if you want to find Power Automate, if you're in Office online, you should be able to click on your waffle menu and you'll find Power Automate. So that's there. It's probably available inside your Microsoft 365 subscription already. And we can build up these processes. So if I want to, I could add another action to here. And as you can see, I can work with Excel. So there's things that we can do with Excel. We can work with tables and rows and various other things. There are things that we can do with, so I'm just trying to think, so files. So we can get the list files in a folder. We can loop through files in a folder and do something to all these files. We can work with Power BI. So there's lots of things that we can do with Power Automate. And then we just add actions into our flow. So what this flow does is that when I click a button, it's going to come to this table. It's going to look at this table and work down row by row. And then for each row in that table, all it's going to do is that it's going to change my cell values. It's going to change my cell values to whatever region I want. It's then going to hide the relevant sheets. It's then going to create a PDF file, and it's then going to email that PDF file to the person who is listed in my table here. So I'm just going to click Run to show you how this, to show you roughly how it works. This is just a quick demonstration. So I'll click Run on this flow. Just going to click Run Flow, and then done. So that's now running. This is all running on the cloud. It's all running in the background. You can see it's running there. I've got my email address here. Hopefully, at some point in the next few moments, some emails will arrive with some PDFs attached of the reports, and they're all written to whoever they're meant to be written to. So that's the goal. Often it takes a few seconds for these processes to run and the cloud to update. But these are some of the newer tools that we have in terms of how we can automate various things inside. So using Excel as the basis of those reports. Let me just click refresh. They should be coming through any moment now, I'm hoping, unless I've got a failure, which says it's still running. So any moment now, they will be coming through, I promise.
Well, while we give them a second, we've actually just
Yes.
had a question from Ali, so perhaps we could have a quick look at Ali's question.
Yes.
Just before we wrap up, and then fingers crossed the emails will have updated in the interim. So Ali was just asking, with the example with the payroll reports that you showed, whether you'd keep the Excel file as a master, which you use to prepare the report each month and save an unlinked copy, or would you copy the Excel each month and therefore the file remain linked forever? She's just thinking from a record keeping point of view if the source data got moved.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So as you can see on my screen now, these reports have started to come through. It depends on your scenario, because if they're part of your processes that are audited as part of your management processes and other elements, then yes, you'll need to keep copies of that if it's part of that process. So it kind of depends is the answer. And the way I would approach it is you can always go back to your source data, and hopefully you can keep your source data all in one place. So therefore you can recreate these at any point. What if it were part of your audited process, what I would say is that I would keep a version of that workbook. I'll then just copy the workbook for the next month, change the date, click refresh. And you can even write an automated process that automatically copies all those workbooks and automatically changes all those dates and automatically refreshes all those queries for you. So even that piece around, oh, have I got to keep a copy? You can automate all of that as well, so that you can have a roll forward process. You click run roll forward process, and it does that. It runs all of those and updates them for you. So yes, you may want to keep copies of that, and you can save unlinked versions and things like that. So that, yes, it just depends on exactly what you need in terms of your audit process and what your company wants to do in terms of that process.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Meanwhile,
so as you can see, our emails have just arrived. So let's have a look at one of these. So we've got the email for Sally. So hi, Sally, here's your region report. So Sally gets the South report. I mean, the detail that's in this report is mostly meaningless, but hopefully it illustrates how this works. So that one was to Sally, this one was to Winston, and then Winston gets the East report. So you can see that we've been able to distribute different reports. Often when we have to distribute cost center reports and other things, what do? We copy and paste the data to somewhere else, and then we copy that file and then we send that file out. But here, using these kind of tools, we can automate cost center distribution to different stakeholders, to whoever we need, different department heads. We can send emails to different customers with attachments saying, here's how much you owe us, or whatever we need to do. All these tools are available for us to use. And I said Power Automate, Power Query, Office scripts, all of these are available inside standard Microsoft subscriptions.
oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, it was really great seeing those emails go to the different people with their relevant section, and it is really neat, isn't it? It's really, that's a massive time saving, a very boring task there, and a task that can go wrong as well, couldn't it, in terms of the risk of sharing the wrong information with the wrong people too. So great to be able to automate.
I mean,
that.
it is worth saying that when you automate something, you still have that risk. It's just that you have that risk that you could do it en masse. So there's always an element of there's still care and attention that needs to be. Because rather than just sending the wrong information to one person, you can send the wrong information to everybody. So there, as much time, so you'll save a lot of time, but equally you need to increase your level of scrutiny and your robustness about that process.
Yeah, of course, but then you've got it laid out exactly how it's working, isn't it? So it's flip sides of the risk issue there. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, many thanks indeed, Mark, for going through those demos and discussing that. It was really fantastic. And many thanks to Tracey for your thoughts. Really, really appreciate it. We have got another minute. Any questions, do pop them in. But meanwhile, perhaps you could both just share a sort of key takeaway to kind of, think about and put into practice. Yeah, Tracey, have you got a key takeaway you'd like to share with us?
I think for me, it's just be brave, dive in there, have a go at it, because I think, it is the tool that has produced the most time saving for me outside of learning all the basic Excel functions initially in your career. I think this is incredibly important tool that, lots of people could potentially use and don't know about.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Tracey. And how about you, Mark?
I would say start small, get some training and start small, and then build up the amount of time saving, and then you can tackle bigger and bigger things once you build up that skill. Because if you dive into your biggest task, you'll soon decide it's just too hard and you'll give up. So therefore you'll never get those benefits. So start small and then build up your knowledge as you go. Get a course. That you're unlikely to find people who are going to have these skills inside your organization. So this is where courses are fantastic for taking you to the next level.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed to you both. And yeah, on that note of talking about courses and things, in terms of what we've got coming up at FI, we have our next digital lunch and learn actually on 27th November. I can pop the registration link in the chat, and you will, of course, get an email reminder about that in due course. And we will also be launching a new format for courses with Mark, actually, on things like Power Query and also Power BI. Then we're just having a look at doing the format for those. We're switching to some sort of half-day sessions, so that's going to be launching in early 2025. So if you want to keep in touch with us about that to hear more about it, I will also pop a link so you can register your interest. I'll put that in the chat too. So yeah, many thanks indeed for you all for joining us now and for giving up your lunch break to come along. It's been great to have you all on board. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you. Bye.